Howdy folks. Now you would probably know that the Z9, like the Z8, doesn't have a mechanical shutter anymore. It does, however, have something that looks just like the shutter, which is actually a sensor cover, so that you can enable the camera to close that automatically when you turn the camera off. That means that when you go to change lenses, your sensor isn't directly exposed to the elements. That's a great thing. So, I recently got back from Bhutan. Whilst I was there, I was traveling and we stopped at a roadside archery match that was going on to celebrate the winter solstice. I was using the Z9's 120 frame per second stills mode and its ability to shoot at up to 1/32,000th of a second to capture the arrow as it left their bow and as the arrow came in to hit the target, just kind of playing around basically. But I was getting so excited about rushing to get the shots and then try not to get hit by arrows and all of that kind of thing, that as I was changing lenses, I dropped the camera body straight onto the ground. Now it was soft dirt, thankfully not concrete or something like that. Still not ideal and with no lens on, so I picked it up, checked that no dust or anything or pieces of mud had actually gotten into my camera. It looked fine. Put the next lens on, kept shooting, and just went with it. Well, let's go into the car and talk it through. So, no one in the car knows this yet, but whilst we're shooting the archery, I actually dropped my camera and it seemed completely fine. I just noticed I was getting a black line in some shots. I actually saw it before, but I thought it was a big shadow in the archery area. But 1/3 of the sensor cover has broken off basically. So my only option to be able to keep getting shots is to get the sensor out of the way. So I've turned off the sensor shield to close. The thing is, I think even gravity may push it back out. Now I've got it most of the way down, but I'm just going to very carefully, without touching the sensor, push that last little bit of sensor cover down so it's out of the way. The best I can. And then my friends at Nikon Hong Kong will be getting a service call. I think I just have to sacrifice that part of the shot and try to keep the camera upright. Yeah, don't drop your camera. Now, flashing back forward another 10 or 12 days since that happened, the sensor cover is still there, it's still tucked in, it's like 99% of the way out of the way, but you can still see it. And to be honest, through the rest of my trip, it's really not an ideal situation. I'm not proud that I dropped it and managed to break the cover like that, but it did work, my fix. Now, I haven't re-enabled the sensor cover. I'm quite sure the same thing's gonna happen, but I don't wanna risk that I accidentally scratch the sensor or something because those curtain pieces could come loose or come up on an angle, that kind of thing. But what I did, essentially, it worked. And here's some of the images that we got with this camera on the trip. Overall, I was really happy with the images I caught on the trip and the sensor didn't get in the way. Now, you might have noticed in that video that there's some marks on the sensor cover beyond the fact that it was falling apart. I never actually addressed this, but that actually happened ages ago and it hasn't impacted my performance of the camera at all, but it kind of looks like it's a little bit melted. Now, the only thing I can think of is that maybe having this covered down with my lens on and at some point the light directly hitting that it acted like a magnifying glass, and because maybe for some time I had it directly in sunlight for an extended period of time, it actually managed to melt that. I don't know, but I really don't think that that is related to this issue. I think it's the drop, and you can see those little pins on the side there that basically it just came undone a little bit. So anyway, I'm back now. I got all of the shots, all of the video I needed for the trip, thankfully. So I'm going to head into Nikon Service Center here in Hong Kong, drop this guy off, and then hopefully it's not too big of an issue for them to either put that sensor shield back together or replace it. So I had already let my MPS rep know that I would need the repair whilst I was in Bhutan. Headed on over to their new showroom in Mongkok, dropped it off for repairs, had a little look around at the displays that they have in the showroom, and then I didn't really get a timeline on how long it would take. Whilst I wait for my camera to be repaired, a quick word from our sponsors, Paperlike, who sent me out the Paperlike 2.1 to use on my iPad. Over the last month, I've been working on my brand new 220-page travel photography guide to Iceland. Reviewing the layout and making markup notes for my designer is so much more convenient when you're on the go using an iPad, and the Paperlike 2.1 makes it a lot more enjoyable, as firstly, it cuts the glare and light refraction, but more importantly, it makes you feel like you're really writing on paper. As you drag your pencil across the screen, the layer of nanodots adds a resistance that feels really natural and comfortable. Version 2.1 has an improved composition for the most accurate paper feel and improved image clarity. Paperlike 2.1 is available for a range of different iPads. You can check it out. I'll pop a link to their website in the description below.
3 weeks later.
Okay, so flashing forward, unfortunately, it's not back yet. I have to say, I didn't check the timeline when I dropped it off, and I just had the impression that it would be like a week or two. After a couple of weeks passed, I was in Nikon, I spoke to the service center manager, he said, it should just be a few more days. A few more days passed, and I called them, and then the message that got relayed was, the parts haven't arrived, it should be 2 to 3 weeks. Now, to be fair, being that I need it for work, I should have checked that and had a clearer idea. And secondly, Nikon did offer me a loaner Z9 because I'm an NPS member, and fortunately they had stock available, and I declined it because I thought without checking that it would be done sooner. Now, so far, it hasn't been an issue. I have the Z9 that I'm filming on. I also have a Z8 and other cameras that I can film with. But if it really does take the full 3 weeks, then I am going to be in a tight spot because I have a trade show that I'm going to in Japan, and I really need both of them. So I'm not complaining. I dropped it. It's my fault. They offered me a replacement. This is more of a cautionary tale for you, especially if you're not an NPS member or you're in a country that doesn't have available loaner bodies, that this can be quite a long repair process. So I'll update you once I get it back.
1 eternity later.
Okay, folks, flashing forward yet again, and I have my camera back, good as new. Well, actually, that's a lie. It's not good as new. It's still all banged up to hell from my travels over the last couple of years, but, you know, it tells a story. Fortunate to have it back and not actually destroyed, but there is a lot of cautionary lessons in this. It was out in the end, thankfully not for the extra 2 to 3 weeks that I was expecting on the last update, but it did take in the end about 3.5 weeks from when I dropped it off to when I was able to get it back. And it cost, the parts and labor comes in at over $400 for the repair. So when you think about that, the sensor shield is something that you don't need to take photos. It's a protective thing, but there's the chance of it falling apart. You know, it kind of puts things in perspective, but I take full responsibility. I dropped the camera. You shouldn't be dropping cameras. Also, I have to say I'm very lucky, one, that I have spare cameras, so it didn't, in this instance, impact my workflow, but two, that I'm an NPS member in a country where they were able to offer me a replacement whilst this one was getting fixed. If I didn't have those options, then I potentially could have had 3.5 weeks without the camera that I need to do the different shooting and video jobs that I have done in this time. Also extremely lucky, and I wouldn't recommend doing it, that, you know, moving the sensor shield out of the way worked and I was able to still get those shots, and that I didn't scratch the sensor in the process of doing that. This was the only camera I had in Bhutan for my long lens kit. I had other cameras, Hasselblads for the travel style photography I was doing, but for the bird photography, I had basically my 400mm lens and this camera, and I wasn't taking a whole bunch of other stuff with me. So I was very fortunate in many ways, and the errors in this process were all my own. And I'm guessing that the sensor shield failing isn't something that happens often, otherwise it would be a part that they stock and not one that they need a couple of weeks to get in to be able to do the repair. So learn from my mistakes. Don't throw your cameras around. Maybe don't go dodging arrows on the side of the road in the middle of Bhutan is also another good lesson for you. Let me know any questions that you have, and I'm very glad to have this back because it's back in time for me to head to Japan and visit CP Plus Trade Show, where there's sure to be loads of great stuff announced there. Let me know any questions that you guys have. Details for the paper-like screen protector are in the description below. Cheers, and I'll see you soon. Hi folks, it's time to get back on the road. I'm pleased to announce my 2024 Photographers Tour to Iceland, running from the 14th to the 26th of May. It's now open for bookings and we're already half filled with people who had pre-registered. You can see full details at the PDF below. Now this tour is specifically designed for the requirements of photographers. It's not your typical on the bus, off the bus, kind of tour by numbers hitting all of the normal tourist traps. We're going to locations that I've handpicked and designed the tour based on the needs of photographers being at the right place at the right time of day to have the right light to give you the best opportunity to create amazing images. Now, the trip itself is adventurous. We're taking photos of an amazing landscape. We're going to be shooting wildlife and the bird migration, but it's also designed for comfort. We'll be traveling in a spacious vehicle with space for you to be able to have your equipment really nearby you and handy to jump off and shoot as we see things on the side of the road that we want to stop for on top of our planned itinerary. And we'll also be staying in really comfortable 4-star accommodation or the best available in the locations that we visit. Now, I've timed this trip to coincide with the annual bird migration where hundreds of thousands of birds descend on Iceland, of course, including the famous puffin. Now, the locations we're going to are some of my favorites. They're fantastic and they give you amazing opportunities to shoot these animals. Some are really off the beaten path, some are known. It's a mix of, what works to get the best possible shots. Now, as I said, we've designed it specifically for photographers, so our itinerary is all around getting the best shots, and we'll have plenty of time built in to be able to make additional stops along the way. The amazing weather patterns combined with the dramatic landscape means that there's just photo opportunities all the time in Iceland. Now, the guide that I use in Iceland is just fantastic. He's one of the most experienced tour guides in Iceland. And I think of all the guides that I've worked with around the world over the past decade or more, he understands the needs of photographers better than anyone else that I've worked with. And that's because he's a filmmaker, a producer, and a location scout, and has worked on countless different movies and TV programs that have been filmed in Iceland. And he just gets that we need to be at a certain place at a certain time of day for the light and to suit what's going to be, our main subject. If it's a natural phenomenon like a mountain, it matters where the light is at that time of day. If it's to shoot birds, then we need to make sure if they're at the nest early morning that we're in that area, or if they're out fishing at that time of day that we're at that location, so that we don't arrive and find that our subject isn't there. So check it out, folks. Full details are in the PDF below. As I said, it's currently open for bookings. We've already hit about 50% of the group capacity, and I have an early bird booking discount up until the end of January. I do that because I want to be getting to the group minimum as soon as possible so that I can greenlight the trip, and then people can start making their travel plans and get the best possible deals on their flights and everything nice and early. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment here, or better yet, my contact details are in the PDF, so you can contact me one-on-one with any questions that you might have. Iceland is truly a photographer's paradise. There's a great reason why it's on so many people's bucket list. So join me. I've been there so many times now and run loads of different tours. I'll be there with you to guide and help with the group to make sure that you get the best possible images and have a really enjoyable trip with all of those little details of where to stay and how to get there and the best access all sorted out for you, so you can just come, bring your equipment, your sense of adventure, and have both an exciting but also a relaxing trip. I hope I'll see some of you there.